theory of evolution has other problems too. According to it, things developed gradually over many years, and those life forms which were most adept to the environment survived, and those which, being different life forms, were not as adept for survival, died out. That's what we're told. That means that evolution, positive evolution, natural selection evolution, would be preferable, would prefer those life forms which multiply or reproduce readily, early in life, and with great security. I don't know if you are familiar with the term differential reproduction, but the Darwinian hypothesis has been pretty much redefined to this day. It amounts to the claim of differential reproduction. Some life forms leave more progeny than other life forms. And if you leave more progeny, more children, then that kind of life form, that version of the cockroach, is more likely to last under the natural environment in which it finds itself. Okay? Well, if that is true, then one has to wonder why anything evolved beyond the bacterial stage. Because bacteria multiply readily, early in their lifespan, and with great protection. It's not hard to get bacteria to grow. I mean, children in elementary school do it in a petri dish. That's real easy. Why then do we have fish that swim upstream? Why do we have advanced animals, reptiles and mammals, that mate in the most awkward of ways? Why do we have any kind of copulation as a form of reproduction at all? When I'm out speaking more popularly to audiences, especially if we have young people in the audience, one of the ways in which I like to show the absurdity of the theory of evolution is by saying, can you really imagine that you, as a human being, and you know how your mother and father had babies, right? You know how human beings copulate in order to have offspring. Can you really imagine that originally you were a life form that was a blob, like amoebas, and how did they reproduce? By what? Division, cell division, right? Okay? And we're supposed to believe that somehow there's a pathway from cell division as a way of having offspring to copulation as a way of having offspring. And all of that by chance over billions of years. Well, I don't believe you can account for the development of life forms at all in this way. But let's just play with this. Let's give the fool his folly for a moment and see what happens. If, whatever you want to call it, the amoeba level, if life at that level reproduced by cell division, and then there were other mutations and developments, and finally you get fish in the sea, and then reptiles on the land, and mammals and so forth. The point is, somewhere along the line, you have the development of genitalia in the life forms, okay, in the living organisms. Why did genitalia develop when they weren't being used for reproduction? And not only that, the genitalia that evolved by chance and for no apparent advantage in the environment, so they weren't being used for reproduction. The genitalia that evolved were of male and female forms. I'm not sure why that would be, but it's even worse. Because, as you know, there's a limit to the fertility of the female, to the male too, but we usually think of female menopause. Okay, so what is the length of time that most human women are able to get pregnant? What is the length of time before they start having their periods, and they go through menopause? 35. Anybody?
35 years.
Okay, 35, 40 years. I'm going to be generous. I'm going to say 100. Most women would shudder, but nevertheless, I will say it's 100. Now you have to remember that if you evolve these life forms from the amoeba level, cell division, reproduction, and these life forms have genitalia that are going to be any good for reproduction, you're going to need to get a male form and a female form together in the same 100-year generation, aren't you? I don't have to rehearse the obvious, right? You get a male humanoid form and no female out there, he's not going to give her any babies. There's no her there. And if you get a female who shows up and she looks around for 100 years and there's no male to mate with, she's not going to have babies. So, again, I'm just being a philosopher. Who am I, you know? I like playing Socrates. I'm just so ignorant. Let me ask you about this now. What you're telling me is we started out as amoeba. We were reproducing as amoeba pretty well, cell division, but then mutations started up. And somehow, over billions and billions of years, we got a male humanoid and a female humanoid in the same narrow window of 100 years. I was being generous. And they knew how to make babies, and they did so. Give me a break. Theory of evolution is a fairy tale for grown-ups. It's worse than what I've just described. Because according to the theory of evolution, which is based upon differential reproduction, there shouldn't have been any advantage for the development of genitalia anyway. There shouldn't have been any advantage to copulation. You notice what happens to life forms once they become more complex. They leave less children behind. Bacteria are very fecund, let me tell you. But mooses are not. You may think dogs are, but dogs are nothing in comparison to bacteria, and human beings are even less. And yet we're supposed to believe that we get to moose or mooses, whatever. We get them, and we get frogs, and we get dogs, and we get human beings by differential reproduction. See, the theory is at war with itself. Nothing should have evolved beyond the bacterial stage.